Hello, and welcome to a brand new day of free to play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Sorry, not Arena, real life. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. Don't worry, we'll get back to Arena soon. Um, but at the moment, I'm showing off this card set, this entire expansion of Magic that I made personally. It's 281 cards. It's called Wastes of Veldmar. We've been through the rules primer, the color factions, all the individual colors of cards, and the multicolor section. This is the last video. We're going to cover Colorless and Land today. And let's just kick things off with the Ancient Crystal Array. This is representing like the older technology that's before the consortium took over from a long time ago. It's a 4 colorless artifact. It's a rare. You can tap it to add 2 colorless mana and gain 2 life, or you can tap to add 1 mana of any color and gain 1 life. I think this is like a super safe card that despite like not making anyone say, wow, that's so, amazing, it's still, I feel like, got the chops to be potentially a staple in things like Commander. Tapping to make 2 mana and gain 2 life, that's probably good enough right there to go ahead and slot into the 99 of a bunch of Commander decks. And also having the mode to make mana of any color is nice functionality, especially for limited play. There are a lot of things that are just desperate to get a little bit of mana fixing. So here's a little bit of mana fixing. Just a workhorse of a card, good solid utility. Okay, so going in alphabetical order, we're going to see this card first. But you might notice it has similarities to some other cards we're going to see later. So this is Arch Theft. You might be wondering, why is this a mythic? Hold on. It's an 8 colorless mythic sorcery. Target player mills 8, then you draw 4 cards. I know this is not the most powerful card ever. It's if you're in a more casual kind of game, then it's certainly playable. It gets you a card advantage, can fill up your graveyard, or it can work towards milling out the opponent. It's a bit overcosted at 8 mana, but then again, you can play it in any color of deck. You can play this in your mono green mill deck. So, and there's a reason that this card is a mythic. And we will touch on that later. But here we see that Lucine Quedron, that we met in the multicolor section, is stealing from Villadra's spellbook, which is definitely a dangerous bit of theft in the world of Veldmar. Assassin's Dagger. This is a 1 mana artifact equipment. It is a rare. Equipped creature gets +1/+0, Death Touch, and Menace. You can equip an assassin or a rogue for 1 colorless, or you can equip any creature for 3 colorless. So I like to keep a number of my designs more clean, more simple. Maybe that doesn't pop with as much wow factor, but I don't know of many pieces of equipment that give this specific array of keywords. And it feels like it delivers on good flavor. If you have an assassin rogue deck, then this is probably going to do some pretty good work for you. And even if you're just in a game of limited, equipping this around for like 3 mana, and there are some assassins and rogues in the set, but you're still getting a pretty good punch of stuff, even if you're equipping it for 3 and limited. So It's not the most amazing card ever, but I think it's plenty playable, at least more casually. All right, here we've got a real classic, Barbed Sextant. So this card was like a meme in the really early days of Magic. You know, when people were making their puerile jokes about the names of Magic cards and saying, "Oh, twiddle my bone flute" and stuff. That like twiddle was a card that can untap something, and bone flute was an artifact that could tap to, I think, give an attacking creature less power until end of turn. Anyway, Barbed Sextant was a meme back then too. Some people would call it Barbie sex. I'm trying not to get demonetized here. Wait a minute, I'm not monetized. Ah, please help me get monetized. This is Barbed Sextant. And you don't see it reprinted much these days. I think it did see a reprint in like a, what is it, like a Modern Horizons or some kind of reprint set like that. It's because it draws a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and there's a card that replaced this called Chromatic Orb. But still, at the end of the day, this is an artifact which can filter your mana once to, fix your mana a little bit, and the card replaces itself. It doesn't do it till the next turn, but it's a way you can card filter and also kind of like churn through the deck. And, it gives you an artifact, puts a card in your graveyard. There's a bunch of like little tiny micro advantages that cards like this can have for you. So if you can take advantage of those little things, the card can add up to more than the sum of its parts. Even if all of that's not true and limited, this can help you into your splash color. Bygone Relic. This is a nod to the old card Scaled Worm. I believe its first printing was in Ice Age. Was a 7/6 in green for 8 mana with no abilities. And at the time, where a lot of big creatures had drawbacks, this was viewed as being a pretty good card. Pretty exciting. It wasn't great even back then, but still people were excited about it because it was like a giant creature with no drawbacks. Those days are long gone. As for whether or not this is playable in Limited, this is a slower format, and while there are a lot of better things that you could be doing, I think this could still potentially be playable in Limited in this format. And this gives you like a giant artifact creature that you could fetch out of your deck with like the uncommon guy from the Roka Guild. So there are reasons that you might choose to play this in Limited. If the format proves to be slow enough, then obviously just choosing the bigger card at some point is the better choice, if speed is not a factor. But either way, I felt like making a nod to the Scaled Worm. So here we are. Charged Colossus. So we have a 9/9 for 9. It is a rare artifact creature golem. And there's a couple of Colossi, in Magic's history, like the Colossus of Sardia and stuff. This is giving a nod to. This has Defender, Reach, and Trample. It enters the battlefield with 3 charge counters, and you can remove a charge counter to do one of these. You can gain 3 life, you can Surveil 3, or this can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. The one where it can attack is probably the one you're going to use the most. But if you are in a serious board stall where maybe the opponent's got a lot of life and a creature with Death Touch and you don't want to run this guy into a Death Toucher, you could choose to start surveilling and dig down through your library to try to find more relevant cards. You can also pay 6 and tap to put a charge counter on Charged Colossus. So It's expensive, but it has a way to regrow its own charge counters. That's just a nod back to some old classic Magic cards, but mostly it's a big artifact creature that has a little bit of other utility. Consortium Capacitor. This is a 3-mana artifact at uncommon. It enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it. You can tap and remove X charge counters. You add X mana in any combination of white, blue, black, or red, the colors of the Consortium. And you can pay 2 and tap and put a charge counter on the capacitor. And the ability costs 2 more to activate if you control a forest. Because you're not supposed to have a forest if you're drafting the Consortium deck. I'm trying to stop 5-color players from poaching the cards that are meant to try to help facilitate the Consortium deck. Because making a 4-color deck is hard. Making it without green is especially hard. So I don't want 5-color green players to be taking cards like this away from the Consortium player. So that's why the ability costs 2 more to activate if you control a forest. So this card kind of references some old cards a little bit. You know, like, black mana battery, green mana battery, some of those cards like that. This one can build up, multiple charge counters over time and give you a burst of extra mana. So, this is in some ways strictly worse than a normal mana rock that can just make 1 mana every turn. But the play can be different. It's not strictly worse because, you could the next turn pay 2 and tap and put a charge counter on this thing. The turn after that, you tap to remove 2 charge counters, and now you've done something that the normal mana rock could not have done. So it's not strictly worse. It's just mostly worse. It's probably good enough to see some play in Limited and nowhere else, I would imagine. Converter Relic. So we've got a 2-mana artifact. It's a rare. You can pay 1 and tap and add 1 mana of any color. So that's a really straightforward ability. This is similar to some other artifacts we've seen, like Prophetic Prism and stuff. But you can also tap and pay 3 life to surveil 2. Okay, now we're doing some other interesting stuff. We're converting not just mana resources, we're converting various resources. And you can tap to banish 7, like exile the top 7 cards of your library to draw a card. So, and this is one of the tensions of the set, where I'm, posing the question, how valuable is it to be moving towards decking yourself? How much of a cost is that to use these cards? Because otherwise, this is just a card that's a 2-mana artifact that can go tap, draw a card. And theoretically, that should be really potent. But if you're going 7 cards deeper towards decking yourself every time you do that, and that's on top of like the card you're drawing and the card you draw for the turn and all of that really adds up quickly. When does it become too much of a cost? Anyway, that will kind of spell out the difference between whether this card is amazing or whether it's kind of junk. In any case, the mana filtering is going to be super useful in Limited. And the Surveil could also be really handy, especially if you're having trouble finding your land drop. Going for a Surveil 2, before your draw step, that should be able to find you a land drop. Corroded Golem. This is a 3/4 for 4. It is a common artifact creature golem. And when this dies, you create 2 trash tokens. So again, a trash token is a colorless artifact token named Trash. Says pay 1, tap, sacrifice this artifact, mill 1, then surveil one. This plays into a bunch of synergies and strategies that exist within the format. You know, if you're Nullveer, you like that you can sacrifice this for value. If you're in Roka, you appreciate that this is an artifact in the first place. Maybe you appreciate that it's a golem, because there's a guy who can sack 2 golems to fetch an artifact creature out of your library for free. If you're in Zarnik, you appreciate that it makes trash tokens when it dies, because you've got special synergies with those. It's it's not an amazing card, but it's a glue piece that does a bunch of little things for a bunch of the different draft strategies. So it's all right. Cursed Berserker Axe from the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is one colorless artifact. It is artifact equipment. It's a rare. The equipped creature has haste and attacks each turn if able. Whenever Cursed Berserker Axe enters the battlefield, or a creature is equipped to dies, attach it to target creature. And you can equip for 1. So that ETB/death trigger doesn't have to target your own creatures. That can target the opponent's creatures. So you can force one of your opponent's creatures to attack each turn if able. It's kind of a niche bit of something that you can do, but that's cool. And if you're not familiar with how equipment works, you're still the controller of that equipment, so the opponent doesn't have the choice or the opportunity to pay the equip cost to move it to some new creature they've played. They can't do that. You're still the controller of the equipment. You can only equip it to something of yours. The only way it ever gets on the opponent's creature is when it enters the battlefield or when the thing it's equipped to dies. That's when you can stick it on an opponent's creature. Otherwise, the opponent basically has no say in what's going on there. So you can move this around to give your own creatures haste for 1 mana, and that could be, worth your time. That could be a good thing to do. Or you can stick this on the opponent's creatures and watch them squirm as they try to figure out how to make profitable attacks with the thing they didn't want to attack with. It's just a neat idea for a piece of equipment. I don't know that it's really that strong, but I think it's cute. I think it's kind of cool. Elsewhere Portal. This is a mythic. It is a 6 mana artifact. If you would lose the game, instead, exile. I've got it as a different name down here. I renamed it to Elsewhere Portal from Otherworld Portal. Anyway, exile Elsewhere Portal and your library. Shuffle up to 60 cards you own from outside the game into your library, then your life total becomes 20. So, if you're in a serious game of Magic, in like an officially sanctioned format kind of a deal, then the cards you own outside the game only include stuff that's in your sideboard. So, that's where the up to 60 cards part comes in. You can take as much as the entire sideboard if you want, turn that into your library, or just 1 card from it. And if you're in a casual game where, anything kind of goes, and when you cast a wish type of spell, you get to go pick whatever card you want, because there are no sideboards really in kitchen table casual. Then you can go just take a different deck and replace your current deck with that deck. You've still got the same lands and permanents and graveyard and stuff, but now you're starting over with a different deck and 20 life, because your life total becomes 20. So I thought this was a fun idea for a card. Just if you're in a casual game, just boop, just I was going to lose, now I'm going to swap out to a new deck. But it could be a useful effect um, for some other formats as well. And we've got a interesting quote from Zeldrava Palthaxidar. In the timeline, I think this would be after she has erased some or all of the memories of Meladra. After that encounter's happened, I imagine this being like kind of like after the climax of the story. This is like the cliffhanger. This is the finale where she's investigating what's going on with the Paxdred and where their psionic powers are coming from. She's going to step through this portal and find out. That's kind of where the story of Wastes of Veldmar pauses and waits for a new chapter. Energy Converter. This is a 2-mana 1/3 artifact creature construct. It's an uncommon. Pay 1, tap, banish 1, add 1 mana of any color. We've seen a ton of artifact creatures like this across all sorts of different sets. This one's got the drawback of you have to have banish 1 to activate it. Now that's kind of the deal with a bunch of cards in Veldmar. It all is contributing to the feel of Apocalypse. So, was it strictly necessary that this drawback be here? Did this need to be worse than other cards like it that do this effect? No. But it's interesting for how it plays in this set, in Limited, when you're playing with the cards out of this set. So, in that context, I think it is more interesting that it has this drawback attached to it. Foraged Axe. We have a 2-mana common piece of equipment. It is just equipped creature gets +3/+2, and it equips for 3. Super simple, right? Incredibly basic piece of equipment. But I felt like the format needed a couple of pieces of equipment like this. There's one in red that gives a big boost and gives trample, and then there's this piece. There needs to be something to make sure that board stalemates get broken up. And so a couple of those big pieces of equipment are part of the way you can do that. You can go ahead and punch through and keep making sure that trades are happening and the game is moving forward. Greater Theft. Okay, the jig is up. You've caught me. As for why Arch Theft was a mythic, it's a vertical cycle. There's like Minor Theft, Lesser Theft, Greater Theft, and Arch Theft that we're going to see. 3 of the 4 feature Lucine Quedrin in their art. So, yeah, these are just, real basic effects. Target player mills 6, then you draw 3 cards. Any color of deck can do this. So, is it the most efficient? Is it going to see, like, standard play or whatever? No. But if you were, like, a new player and you just want some way for your green deck to draw a bunch of cards, you just are cobbling together a collection, yeah, you could throw this into a big green ramp deck and now you've got card advantage, just staring you in the face. If filling up your graveyard is useful, you got that too. So these are not trying to be the best cards ever, but I feel like they still are well positioned to serve kind of a simple, basic teaching kind of role in the game. And they also open up mill as a strategy to other colors. Not in a, very competitive way, but still it's there. Illithid Elder Brain. There's actually an Elder Brain card that was printed in a commander set. That card was black. It does something kind of different than this card does. So what we have here is a 7/7 4/7. It is a horror. When Illithid Elderbrain enters the battlefield, each opponent banishes cards equal to the number of horrors you control. And at the beginning of your upkeep, gain control of target non-land permanent with mana cost equal to or less than the number of cards exiled with Illithid Elderbrain. So this is a card that's milling your opponents, but it's also gaining control of permanents. The first time it fires, depending on how many horrors you have and how many opponents you're facing, you might not be able to gain control of anything. But if it survives another round, or if you've got multiple opponents and a fair number of horrors, then it counts the total number of cards exiled with it. So the more opponents you have, the higher that mana cost can be. So it doesn't take long at all before this can target anything on the field, basically, to be gaining control of it. And this is a payoff for having a creature type deck based around the horror creature type. I don't think they have a lot of support that I know of, unless there's been something printed in commander sets that I haven't been paying attention to. I thought it would be neat to throw the horror creature type a bone here. And there are some horrors that are in this set. You could build a draft around this card. There are other colorless horrors. There's also some horrors in black, I believe. So, yeah, you can make this a thing. Especially if you get this card early in the draft and you kind of tilt your draft towards it. It's a fun sideways draft I think you could try to do for the format. Illithid Enforcer. This is a 3/2 for 3. It's an uncommon creature horror. It has Vigilance and Ward of Banish 2. So in order to target it, the opponent has to exile the top 2. And it also has the activated ability, pay 2 and tap, target opponent banishes 2. Just all in on the, kind of Pax Dread strategy. So if you're in Pax Dread, you have some extra support in Colorless here. Just something to take note of. Also, even if you're not Pax Dread, but you think you could take advantage of all the banish that's happening and all the self-banish that's happening in the format, you could maybe try to make a mill deck that's not a Pax Dread deck. It'd be a very sideways draft. Illithid Muscle. This is a 4/4 for 4. It is a rare creature horror. It has Vigilance and Ward Banish 4. And it can pay 2 and tap target creature an opponent controls, and put a stun counter on it. That's the, Mind Blast power that the Illithids have. Can stun their opponents so they can, move up and eat their brains, using their face tentacles to grapple under their head. This card is okay. It's probably, it's hard to push something in straight colorless that doesn't actually use like the colorless mana symbol to be competitive to see play in constructed. But this is a really solid chunk of creature for limited play, I'm going to say. Illithid Wanderer. We have a 2/3 for 3. It's common. Creature horror. As long as you control a land named Wastes or Snow-Covered Wastes, Illithid Wanderer has Menace. And whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, that player banishes 2. So, still staying on brand with the, trying to banish out the opponent. Still plays well with the Pax Dread. Or trying to go your own route and find some other way to mill out the opponent. Land Survey Apparatus. It's a 2 colorless artifact. It's an uncommon. You can pay 2 and tap and banish 3. You may put a land that was exiled this way into your hand. So you're not guaranteed to get a hit when you do this, but some other similar cards to this one specifically fetch basic lands or lands of a particular type. This one, it just cares if it's in your top 3. So this can find any cool non-basic or, anything like that, just as long as it's in your deck. And, it is a good way in Limited to make sure you can keep finding your land drops. It also adds to the tension of milling yourself out as the game is progressing. But it could turn on some self-banish strategies like the Zarnik. So this is a good glue piece for the format while also adding to the tension of the apocalypse. Leftover Looter. This is a 2/1 artifact creature construct for 2 mana. It's a common. When Leftover Looter enters the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. This is a card that I think could be printed in just about any modern Magic set now. Things similar to this see print all the time. And it's just kind of something to smooth over the beginning of the game, If you're really flooded on land, or if you're really, trying to get to your 3rd land drop, a card like this can help dig you a little bit deeper into the deck, just to kind of smooth things over. Just a helper piece for draft. Lesser Theft. So this is the 4 mana version, an uncommon. Target player mills 4, then you draw 2 cards. And honestly, at this mana price, drawing 2 cards, it's sorcery speed, right? If it was instant speed, it'd be kind of a little bit interesting for people who aren't blue. Still, it's probably reasonably playable. And something I'd like to say about vertical cycles is they are great teaching tools for new players. So when a new player sees a vertical cycle like this, they get to learn about, card advantage and, the efficiency of mana cost and tempo. There's all kinds of stuff that's packed into a lesson like that, with just even a very simple card design like this being scaled up into a vertical cycle. Memory Furnace. This is a 3 mana common artifact. Tap, banish 2. Add 1 mana of any color. When you do, create a trash token. So, yes, you're exiling 2 cards every time you make the mana, which is painful, but you're also putting material on the battlefield in the form of the trash token. That benefits some strategies more than others, but everyone in this format basically would love to have the mana fixing. So I think banish 2, at least some amount of the time, is a price you're willing to pay. Hopefully eventually you'll hit the colored lands that you need to be able to cast those spells, and maybe at some point you stop using the Memory Furnace quite so much. But yeah, it's just, this is the mana rock that feels like it's right for the set. It's playing into the themes of the set. So even though this might be like a strictly worse mana rock in some ways, it's interesting, and a lot of other mana rocks are not making token artifacts at the same time. Unless they're producing like treasure or something. So that's a little bit of interest for deck building that might exist, even outside of it being like a piece for Limited. Mining Rig. This is a 2 mana artifact. It's a common. It can tap to sacrifice a land, you draw a card, and create a treasure token. So this is similar to the 2/4 artifact for 3 that was in Thunder Junction. It has an activated ability with pay 2, tap, sacrifice a land, you draw a card, and create a treasure token. This one doesn't have a 2/4 defender attached to it. It also doesn't cost any mana to activate it. So, technically speaking, if you wait a turn, this can actually ramp you on mana by 1, because you can tap a land the next turn, then sacrifice the tapped land to make a treasure, and sacrifice the treasure, and then you're actually +1 mana in a little burst that turn. This is just a good helper piece that can help smooth over, if you're getting mana flooded in limited. And it's a way that you can produce token artifacts. So if you needed a good source of artifact tokens and you were a little light on playables, you could run Mining Rig and put like 18 lands in your deck and just kind of rely on the Mining Rig as a way of producing artifacts for you as you're like churning through all the extra lands that you put into the deck. Miner Theft. So this is the only one that doesn't have Lucine Quedron in the art. So this is just the little common one. 2 mana sorcery, target player mills 2, you draw a card. Very simple, very basic. Still, it's at a cheap enough cost that if what you want to do in a limited game is fill up your graveyard and try to hit your land drop, then this could still be a playable glue piece kind of card. Like, not something exciting, but kind of in that, 22nd, 23rd, 24th playable kind of a card range, where you're just looking for ways to kind of smooth things over and keep enabling your strategy. And yeah, this is fine. Obsolete Dragon. This is a 5/5 for 9 mana. Artifact creature dragon. It's an uncommon. It has Bulwark 4, Flying, and Haste. Bulwark 4 means whenever it attacks, it gets +0/+4 until end of turn. So this is a 5/5 Flying Haste that attacks as a 5/9. And this is a callback, a reference to Tika's Dragon. I doubt many people even remember Tika's Dragon anymore, but it's an overcosted artifact creature that nonetheless could still win you a game of Limited. This could be a fun target to try to pull out with the Roka Guild Uncommon, where you sack 2 golems, then you can find an artifact creature in your deck and put straight onto the battlefield. You could do a lot worse than Obsolete Dragon. Just start charging across with haste in the air. And that could be a good way to end the game. Psy Crystal Blade. This is a 2 mana common piece of equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+2 and has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player banishes 1. And it equips for 1 colorless and banish 1. So you have to both pay 1 mana and exile the top card to equip it to a creature. So it's just kind of a neat bit of flavor here on this equipment. Crystals are kind of representing both psionics with the illithids. They also represent potentially old technology on Veldmar. And which one this is, I will leave as a mystery. Ritual of the Void. This is a 2 mana sorcery at common. You lose 1 life, then create a blood token. Search your library for a land named Wastes or Snow-Covered Wastes, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So this is not dissimilar from some other cards that we've seen in recent sets. Like there's Ecologist's Terrarium from Neon Dynasty. In Strixhaven, there was the Lesson for 2 colorless that would gain you 2 life and find you a basic. This one only finds a waste, but it also gives you a blood token. It costs you a life, but that's not a big price to pay. So finding a waste and finding a blood token is kind of equivalent to drawing a card, Because if you wanted to, you could discard the waste if you don't need the land drop, and to the blood token to find a different card. Or you could just use the waste as your land drop sometime later in the game, find some benefit for the blood token, and it's kind of netting you some little subtle advantages. It's not quite worth 2 cards for what it does, but it's probably worth more than a single card by the time you've used the waste and the blood token. And it's also hinting that something weird a bit is going on with the waste-infused magic of Veldmar, and maybe with the Illithids. Terrain Enhancer. This is a 1/1 artifact creature construct for 1 mana. You can sacrifice it to Surveil 2, and until end of turn, target land you control gains tap, add 1 mana of any color. So I won't lie, this is kind of the bad option if you're trying to color fix in the early game. This is the one you don't really want to have to use. But that being said, the Surveil 2, it's not exactly paying you back a card, but it kind of is. You're kind of getting advantages by seeing what's coming in your library, setting the top of your deck, maybe getting value for putting things in your graveyard. And maybe you can get value out of sacrificing it, like if you're in the Aristocrats type of strategy. You could get some extra value from triggers in that way. But mostly I would say this is the poor man's mana fixing. It's kind of if you're a bit more desperate and you're a bit low on playables in your deck. It'll still help smooth out the early game for you, though. It'll get you the color of mana that you need. It'll surveil you to the land that you need to find. So maybe it's not even as bad as I'm making it out to be. Unsolved Riddle. This is a 5 mana colorless instant. It's a rare. Tap up to 2 target permanents, then distribute 7 stun counters among any number of target tapped permanents. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. When I took a long look at what colorless cards and artifacts and such were capable of, one of the things I landed upon was tapping things. Going all the way back to the earliest parts of the game, where you've got, your Winter Orb and your Icy Manipulator. Colorless cards have been able to lock stuff down for about as long as Magic's been around. So why not put it onto an instant? Why not make it kind of a tempo play? This card is probably more powerful than it looks. It looks like it's a, humdrum, kind of limited combat trick. That's nice and all. But it's any permanent. It can include land. So if what you wanted to do was, at the end of the opponent's turn, target a bunch of their lands and put stun counters on them, you could do so. And now on their next turn, they're not going to untap those, and that could be a big problem for them. It could also, turn the tide of battle, much like a sleep spell would have from blue. It's, I think this card is probably stronger than it appears. It even replaces itself with a card draw. So, I know 5 mana is a lot, but what I'm saying is this card does a lot. I would not underestimate it. Void Strike. So, just exile target permanent. 7 mana sorcery, it's a common. This is not as good as the Eldrazi one from Rise of the Eldrazi. Right, that one is an instant for 7 colorless. So this is strictly worse than that card, but in this set, I'm comparing it against Desert Twister. And so compared to Desert Twister, I feel like this card should be a sorcery, and the 8 mana version would be like an instant. So within the internal consistency of Wastes of Veldmar, Void Strike made sense to print at 7 mana as a sorcery. And it's probably fine. You know, it's pricey, but it cures what ails you. So if the format ends up being slow, you probably can run a couple of these from time to time, especially if you got ramp. Walking Mine. This is a 1/1 uncommon for 4. Is an artifact creature pest. And when it dies, it deals 3 damage to any target, and you create a trash token. So this isn't the most efficient card by any means, but that being said, it's not bad. It can trade with a 4 toughness thing by itself. It leaves behind a trash token after it's done its thing. There could even be, you know, like Aristocrats type of deck where you sacrifice it, use its death trigger, pull it back from the graveyard later. I think this card's fine. I think it is definitely usable in the limited format. Wand of Villadra. It costs X. It's a rare artifact. When this ETBs, you banish X cards face down under Wand of Villadra. Then you can pay 2 and tap, and you choose a face down card exiled with it at random. Turn it face up. You can play that card from exile at any time. So basically, this is setting you up to draw some cards, right? First, you pay X, and then later you can flip up one of those X cards, and now you have access to it. So it's just a way to draw some cards in kind of a slightly slow, clunky, roundabout way, which is normal, I would say, for artifacts. You know, it's you're not supposed to be as good as blue at drawing cards, but this could still generate a ton of value for you. And Wastefire. Wastefire is a 5 mana instant. It is an uncommon. It deals 3 damage to any target. That's it. So red gets Lightning Bolt, colorless gets Wastefire. I think this is not completely unplayable as removal. That being said, it's not great. I think if you have a better option, you would rather take a better option. But if you don't got one, then you could run Wastefire and it'll find something to kill in a game of Limited. So I don't think it's unplayable. It's just very mediocre. We're almost there. We're on to the land. Consortium Guildhall. This is a rare. Enters the battlefield tapped. It can make colorless, or it can tap to make white, blue, black, or red. Activate this ability only if you control no forests. And yeah, this is a strong non-basic land. The set kind of needed a bit of support like this, so I went ahead and made it. And I think with the activate with only no forests clause, actually trips it up in some decks in older formats that would otherwise be keen to have it. Because a lot of those decks use non-basics that have like 2 or 3 basic land types. And very often one of those is going to be forest, and that means it doesn't play well with the Consortium Guildhall. So I think that means that both in and out of Limited, the decks that want this are the decks that are what it ought to be going to. People in the consortium colors. Consortium Mana Station. This is an uncommon land. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life and surveil 1. It taps to make colorless. You can also pay 1 and tap to make white, blue, black, or red. So this is better and worse than some of the like scry lands and surveil lands that we've seen in recent sets, where you can pay 1 and tap and make a mana of any color. Well, this one only makes 4 of the colors, but it surveils and gains you 1 life when it enters the battlefield. So it's actually better and worse than those lands are. So it occupies an interesting position in that way. And I feel like if you ever made the other 4-color factions in some other expansion of Magic, you could take this land and expand it into a cycle at some point. I think it would be pretty fair. Consortium Monolith. This is a rare. Taps to make colorless. Or you can tap and pay 2 life, and it'll make white, blue, black, or red. As long as you control a forest, this ability costs an additional 2 life to activate. So I've seen a number of variations on City of Brass. Some of them may have been forgotten in the annals of time. Like, I don't know if anyone in Commander is running Tarnished Citadel that was made in Odyssey, where it can tap for a colorless, or you can like pay 3 life and tap to make a mana of any color. There were a bunch of variations that were made on City of Brass ages ago. So this one doesn't make green, but it's playing around in the same kind of space where it's a pain land. So a pay 2 life pain land is pretty painful. Not undoable though, I would say, and having the option to make colorless means you might not have to hurt yourself the entire time it's in play. But paying 4 life to get access to these colors, that would be a steep, steep cost. It comes in untapped, so I could imagine someone still doing it for some specific purpose. I would have to imagine, though, they would have other better choices of lands rather than this one if they want to run forests. But this is just more good, solid, powerful mana fixing for consortium colors. Contaminated Aquifer. You might recognize the name of this card. These were printed in Dominaria United. This was the tap land cycle that has 2 basic land types. So why did I choose this as my as my tap land cycle? There's a couple of good reasons within the set. One are the consortium cards that don't want you to control a forest. So 5-color deck or whatever in this set, they're going to be trying to pick up, just any tap lands that they can, including ones that have forests. Those forests are a poison pill for the consortium cards that, have all kinds of punishments if you have a forest. So that's one reason they're here. Another reason they're good in the set is that, the colors other than green all have a card that banishes until you find like a land of a particular basic land type, but it doesn't specify that it must be a basic land. Just that, it has to be an island or a swamp or a mountain. And those cards are going to play nicely with these being in the set. So it's just a couple of subtle little reasons, but it was enough that I decided that this was the Tapland cycle that I wanted to go with. So all 10 of them are in here. I made new art and new flavor text for them, but we'll just kind of click on through as we come across them. I'll pause long enough that you can pause the video if you want to take a look at it and read it. Crumbling Edifice. This is a rare. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 0/1 colorless wall artifact creature token with Defender. It taps for colorless, or you can tap and banish 6 and add 1 mana of any color. And that's a steep cost, but this one turns on even the 5-color decks. This one is not a consortium land in particular. So if you just really badly need mana fixing, this can do it. It just burns through your library in the process. But also it gives you a little wall. And being a land that makes a little creature token probably means this land would see play like in Eternal formats. For decks that really want like a piece of material on the board to block or to sacrifice, something like that. So I think that Crumbling Edifice is a card that would definitely get adopted into the old formats, the powerful formats. Desolate Barrens. This one's interesting. It's uncommon, enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for up to 3 cards named Desolate Barrens, reveal them, put them in your hand, then shuffle. And it taps to make colorless. So it's a tap land that only makes colorless mana, which is terrible, but it can give you card advantage. It can go and fetch up to 3 copies more of itself, right? It can fetch up the whole playset of them out of the deck. So then you're certain you can hit your land drops, you can discard the other ones from your hand to get various benefits. So it's a bad land, but it gives you a bunch of copies of this bad land. And that might be an interesting reason to include it in a deck. You know, there's card advantage stapled onto this really terrible land. Is that good enough to make you want to play it? I thought it was kind of a neat space to play around in. Forest. For the basics, there is 1 piece of art for each of these. If I was going to make it into booster packs, because of the way that Wastes of Veldmar is so devastated with war and all of that, the traditional basic lands would actually be quite rare in the booster packs. Like, you might have a 1 or 2% chance of hitting, like, plains, island, swamp, mountain, forest, and then all the rest of the percentage chance gets taken up with wastes or the tapland cycle. So it would be a very unusual phenomenon when you actually open one of the traditional basics, and they would only come in 1 piece of art. I don't want to make them like outrageously rare. Right? The point that you start making them in multiple variant arts and stuff, then they become much too rare to collect. But I thought it would be an interesting twist with Veldmar if the basics were hard to find, which is true for the people in the plane as well. They're all kind of searching, trying to find where life and nature still can survive in Veldmar. And you, the player, get to kind of experience the same thing. Geothermal Bog, another one of the tapland cycle. Haunted Mire. Idyllic Beachfront. Incinerator. This is an uncommon. It's a land, it taps for colorless. You can also tap, sacrifice a permanent, add 1 mana of any color. So this is kind of a rough color fixer, but there are ways to get tokens and trash tokens and other stuff in the format. So if you can turn that on, if you can get some trash to feed to the incinerator, then you can color fix yourself. And it just felt very flavorful and appropriate um, for what Veldmar is doing. Islands. Landfill. This one's an uncommon. The landfill enters the battlefield tapped. It taps for colorless. At the beginning of your upkeep, banish one and create a trash token. So landfill kind of combos with incinerator, because landfill is making you trash every turn, then incinerator can burn those trash to make mana of any color, which is kind of cute. Because sending stuff from the landfill to the incinerator is what a lot of places do in real life. I think landfill's a pretty good card in this format. There's a lot of artifact synergies and trash token synergies that can take advantage of this. The only thing I'd be a little bit cautious of is playing this as my first land in the game. If I do that, I want to be on the ball with trying to win the game, because at that point you're setting yourself up to banish an extra card every upkeep for the rest of the game with your first land drop. Which is kind of like cutting your library in half. Molten Tributary. Mountain. Plains. Radiant Grove. Resistance Hideout. This one is a rare. Resistance Hideout enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters, you choose a color other than green, and you can tap it to add green or 1 mana of the chosen color. I don't know if I've seen these lands be made yet in Magic. I think they're fair because they're tap lands. So, I don't think there's any reason they couldn't be made. The ones that are commons usually just like they enter tapped, you pick one color and it just makes that one color. This one, since it can make green or that one color, I thought I should step up the rarity. Sacred Peaks. Sinking Valley. This is an uncommon land. When it enters the battlefield, you mill 2. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can pay 1 tap, add 1 mana of any color. So this is very much in the same vein as the like scry lands and surveil lands and stuff we've had recently that can do these same effects. This one does a mill 2. A mill 2 is essentially random. It can still be a benefit to you if you can get value out of your graveyard, but in this set it's also a little dangerous because you've been banishing so much stuff. There's so many cards that ask you to banish things that adding mill on top of that banishing is a little bit of a risky prospect. But still, overall, this is a good land for the format and one that a bunch of decks would be happy to have. Sunlit Marsh. Swamp. Tangled Islet. Wastes. Okay, so we're up to this point. There's actually 5 different arts that I included for Wastes. It's because they're such a big part of the plane, they're more common than the basic lands are. I mean, Wastes are basic lands, but I mean the traditional basic lands. So I wanted to, fill them out a little bit more, give them more variety, because you'll be seeing so many. So there's a couple that have these giant weird crystal structures on them, which is kind of a new thing on the plane. It's, well, not necessarily new. Some of the ancient technology on the plane uses crystals, but some of these could be new growths of material from some sort of a, planar incursion. Some kind of magic that's making its way into Veldmar. And others of them just, show the devastation of like the Consortium War, um, and the various exploitation of nature that's gone on. Wooded Ridgeline. Yawning Chasm. This is our last one. It's a rare. So it enters the battlefield tapped. It taps to make colorless. And when this enters the battlefield, target creature can't attack until the beginning of your next turn. So this does kind of like a little mini Maze of Ith type of effect with just its ETB trigger. I thought that was kind of neat. The flavor of it's that you're on one side of the chasm and the creature you're trying to fight's on the other side of the chasm, so you have to wait a little bit before you can fight each other. And that's all the cards in the set. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. I would be excited to try to, play this somehow just for fun. I don't know, maybe with some kind of program, or maybe I could just proxy some cards so I can play, privately. Obviously, this is just for fun. It's not something that's for sale, right? But still, I would be totally psyched to be able to try this out. I hope you all have enjoyed the journey with me. And maybe if enough people like it, at some point, perhaps I will make a second set, a sequel to the first one. Expect me to be hitting up Arena again sometime soon, brewing up some new decks. Anyway, like and subscribe, check out my other videos, and until next time, never stop honing your critical thinking and empathy.